Welcome to Glowing Success. My name is Heidi and I am your host. This podcast is for beauty entrepreneurs. Join me weekly as we dive into the beauty industry's ins and outs, from business strategies, top-selling services, and taboo topics. I will be interviewing industry leaders with empowering stories and game-changing insights. Let's illuminate your path to success together. Let's jump into this next episode. Welcome back to Glowing Success. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about how I went from a beauty school dropout to a business coach. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my story today. This is something I don't necessarily talk a lot about, but I do want to share with you guys, about my story, about my background, how I came to be, so to speak, okay? I got kicked out of my first beauty school, and it was definitely a crazy time. I remember some parts of it very vividly. So basically, I was in my early 20s. So I think I was like 20 or going to be 21. And I went to full cosmetology school, and I had about, I think, a little over 1,000 hours done. In the state of Minnesota at that time, you needed 1,550 hours to graduate in order to take your licensing test. So I was on the floor. So I was ready to take clients. I was plugging away at my quotas. I was, overall, I remember having a good time in school. So when I was there, I was, I would consider myself a good student. I would consider myself like, I was fairly good at everything I did. I did not enjoy doing nails, but I really enjoyed cutting hair, styling hair, and of course the aesthetics part about it. And I did not enjoy color. So anyways, at that time I was partying too much and I was very lost. And actually, looking back now with like therapy that I've done and just like life experience that I've had and so forth, I know from experience now that at that time I just didn't feel supported. I wasn't really driven in any direction other than like, hey, I think I should do this. I wasn't holding a job very well at that time. And so, when you're in those phases in life, your resort basically is like hanging out and numbing out, right? So we, not even thinking about it, not even thinking about those actions being that at that time, but like avoiding my actual true responsibilities, avoiding, what I should be doing to propel my life forward. So I got kicked out of beauty school because I didn't go. So I would skip a lot of days. I would leave early at lunch. I would do all the things you're not supposed to be doing. So they kicked me out basically for truancy. And I did, so when it happened, I think naively, I was young enough that when it happened, I thought that they wouldn't kick me out, right? You just think that they would just give you a slap on the wrist and just be like, hey, you need to do better, like come, start coming to school or some kind of talk like that. But when they say, hey, you're expelled, or like, we're doing this, I was in shock, of course. So they did give me an opportunity to take a leave of absence. So I will say that leave of absence was short. I think your leave of absence is either like, I think it can be up to 90 days, but I don't remember how much my leave of absence was. So I will say they did give me an opportunity before I actually got kicked out fully. But that leave of absence, the day that I was supposed to go back to beauty school, I actually also got kicked out of my apartment that week. That's another long story. But so I finally, got kicked out at that second time because I could not go back at the time that I was supposed to in order to finish my hour mark. So you do have a certain amount of time after you get kicked out of beauty school to finish your hours in order for you to, still go back and still kind of finish. And then after that, you have to start all over again. So I forget what the time period is, but they do kind of have rules when it comes to all this. And so, At that time, it was so hard because, like I said, I didn't have really good support system around me. I didn't, have a strong, like, yeah, you're good at this. Yeah, you should do this. I didn't have a lot of self esteem, so to speak. I understand why all of this happened now. But at the time, you just end up feeling like a failure. You end up feeling, and that's how I did feel. I did feel quite sad. I felt lost. I already wasn't doing really well in other parts of my life. So, you want to do well in the parts where you feel passionate. So I've always been in the beauty industry. My first job in the beauty industry is when I was 16. I started working at Great Clips. I was front desk. So I would open and close the salon. I would sweep hair. I would put the stylist combs and disinfectant. I would do anything that needed to be done around at the shop. So, like, dusting the shelves, doing inventory, doing the till, doing, in the back room, doing laundry. I did all that. So I was in the beauty industry for a while before I went to school to be a professional. And so that passion was there. So I will say, like, that passion had always been there, right? Let's fast forward to years later. So I went back to just aesthetics. So through that process of getting kicked out, through that process of going to school for cosmetology, I really quickly realized that, like, I always loved the aesthetics parts. So I loved giving the facials. I loved doing the brow waxes. I loved doing the brow tints, things like that. So when I did decide to finally go back to be a professional or a licensed professional, I just dove right into aesthetics because I was like, hair is fun and I liked it, but, like, I just wasn't as passionate about that. So mind you, between the time that I got kicked out of my first beauty school, so between the time I got kicked out of cosmetology school and I went back for aesthetics, there was some years in there. So I had always worked in the beauty industry during that time. I did have a few jobs here and there, but not very long term. So my longest jobs were always in the beauty industry. So I worked front desk at 3 different salons during that time. So I believe I went back to school when I was 26. So back to aesthetics. So I did really well this time because I was in a different position in life. I had different goals. I had different people around me. I had different things, right? I had a little bit more self-esteem. I had a little bit more motivation and dedication to it. So graduated with flying colors, like, did really well. Opened my business while I was in school. Then a year later, actually went back for massage. So I decided, hey, I kind of like massage. I like anatomy. I wouldn't mind doing massages and facials and aesthetics, and my business. Can you imagine? So I was just graduating aesthetics, started my business while in school, obviously got a job right outside of school too, because I worked alongside of starting my business. So that was just how I paid my bills, right? So I worked at a laser clinic right outside of school, went back to massage school, all while I was running my business on the side and still doing aesthetics. So I think you can only do those types of schedules and things when you're probably in your 20s. But I definitely was really busy, got out of massage school, stopped working at the laser clinic and actually started working at like a membership chain spa. So I was doing both aesthetics and massage for that spa and then still doing my business on the side. So the reason I could do my business on the side very easily at that time was the services I offered in my business at that time were lash extensions, spray tanning, and wedding makeup. So I did airbrush makeup. So those 3 services at that time were not regulated by commerce in my state. So that's number 1. So I could do those services in any location that I wanted to. And that also means you don't have to be a licensed, service provider to offer those services, but I was. And the salon that I worked for, the spa that I worked for, did not offer those services either. So nothing was in a non-compete, nothing was, everything was perfectly legal. I didn't start doing my services back in my business in a salon until 2016. So I opened my spa in 2011, And by 2016, I had to go into a spa or a location because the state of Minnesota regulated lash extensions. So they regulated that by commerce. So, but spray tanning and I think parts of makeup are still not regulated by commerce. I think in the state of Minnesota, makeup is regulated slightly. So you have to take like a sanitation class, but I don't think it requires that you're a licensed esthetician or cosmetologist to offer makeup. You just have to take this sanitation class. But I believe that spray tanning is still an unregulated service here in Minnesota. So anyway, so I worked at that membership-based spa until I could basically pay my bills with my business, until I could take care of myself with my business. So it was a couple years that I worked all of that. Once again, I think that's only something you can do for a short period of time and when you're young. But, it's good experience. Obviously, having all that experience of me working front desk, going through all of these different things, I will say have helped me in my business actually, because, I know what that worst case scenario failure, so to speak, feels like. And I also know business side of things from a different perspective. So working front desk in the salons like that I have worked in, I really appreciate that time because it really taught me all the things of how to open and close, how to order retail, what inventory looks like tipping, like cash money, that kind of transactional stuff, how to keep your salon and spa clean, like what happens during inspections, like customer service, managing a team, like all of those skills I learned because I worked front desk. And so by the time I actually started hiring in my business, I felt like I had a good handle on it. Don't get me wrong, I don't think any business owner or employer is perfect. We all have a lot to learn, and every person is different from what they need in their lives, right? But it definitely set me for a good foundation. And I do feel like even just all of my work experience leading up to that too, of like my, hands-on experience in the professional side. So when I was a licensed esthetician and, that side, that taught me a lot too, working for somebody else, being a professional like that too, being on the other side, so to speak. So I take all of this and say, yeah, okay, I got kicked out of my first beauty school, and that's coming out with it is really harsh. But man, I don't think I would change my story. I don't think I would change my past. I think that if anything, it really, propelled me in different directions at different times. Yes, but it taught me so much. You know what I mean? Like, I just think that it's not something that you should hide. If you have a story that's like kind of, not typical, because I would say that that's not typical for many other people that I talk to in the industry. Don't be scared of it. Your story is your story and that's unique to you. And how you come out on the other side is really where it's at. You know what I mean? Like for me, I built, my business for 13 years, and I just think that, that time is really cherished, and that those are the memories that I have is like, hey, I think I did really well in my business. I've gone back to just solo. I'm training others how to do things. So I take all of that experience of having my own business, being in the industry in different ways, having all the ups and downs, the failures, the wins, and all of that. And that's where I led into coaching. So, and I started coaching, honestly, when I was still a service provider, still taking clients too. So, I think everything in my life, the one thing I will say that's consistent is things have overlapped. So I've always worked while building something else because, at the end of the day, you got to pay your bills, you got to survive, you got to do all the things, right? So if you're going through kind of a tough time in your life where you're like, gosh, why is my path looking like this? Or why is it so hard? Or what is this lesson that I'm trying to learn? Or what have you? Like, just know that keep on going. Determination can really get you far. But that passion, right? So in my story, I noticed that if I look back, the passion for the beauty industry, the passion for the clients, the passion for being a part of this industry, which is amazing. We get to impact people's lives in such a unique way. That never left. That never changed, right? It might have felt like it did for a while there when I was younger, but actually, in true reality, that never left me. I always had a passion for this industry. I always had passion for serving others. I always had passion for making clients happy and so forth. So I will say, hold on to that. One thing I want you to think about and maybe write down today, though, is why you joined the beauty industry. Why did you originally even either have your first job or go to beauty school? What was that first initial thought that came to your brain? So, the one thing I want you to do is not second guess it. So, whatever's naturally that first thought that came, that's why you joined. And that, hold on to that, because that is going to propel you in all the directions you want to be. Okay. And, one thing I will say is like, I think all of this has made me such a better business coach too, because I know all the questions and I know all of the concerns, and I've been in those same exact positions. So if you are looking for some guidance, if you're like, Heidi, I'm feeling lost with my marketing, I'm your girl, because I have been through it. I've asked all the same questions. I've gone over those hurdles. I've now gone to the other side and said, hey, this is what actually works in this industry. This is what actually works to attract clients in the door. If you haven't already, I have a few resources to check out for you guys. If you haven't already, join my free training. It's amazing. It'll definitely give you that little jolt and jumpstart that you need to attract those clients in the door. If you're a new business owner, I want you to join my Jumpstart program. It's called Beauty Business Jumpstart, and it's exactly what it sounds. It's going to give you that jumpstart to starting a new business. And I will put both of those links in the show notes today. I hope you feel inspired by my story. I hope you can share your story with somebody else, or maybe me if you want to be on. But I really hope that this propels you forward and gives you that little kick or maybe that direction that you're needing. And of course, thank you for listening. I hope you liked that episode and found something useful or a tip that you can use immediately. And my episodes come out weekly, so I'll see you in the next episode.